Back when we did the shotcrete on the Quonset hut, we bucked out a side door between the garage and the mudroom. Leaving the Quonset intact was important because we didn't want to weaken that Quonset structure before adding the wet concrete load. The buck's job was to keep the concrete off this section so that we could come back later and cut it out and make a doorway there without needing a big concrete saw. Now that the mud roof is on, it's time to punch a door through the side of the Quonset. First, we removed the bolts that were holding the Quonset panels together. Next, we used the grinder to cut a rough opening just several inches inside that buck. And once we could easily see how close we were to the buck, we could go back and do a closer cut. The Quonset had been grouted right into a groove in the floor, so we cut that off as close as we could, and then we used a concrete wet polisher with a diamond cutting wheel to make it smooth and flat. We also used a flap disc with the grinder to smooth off the metal edges of the doorway. There were also some little concrete lumps in this area and we chiseled them out. The hammer drill was very effective. When it came time to actually position the door, I realized that I had put a double board in the top of the buck to strengthen it, and it was in the way now, so we just cut that out. Now that the pre-hung door frame fits in the opening, we just needed to get it in there, get it level, plumb, and square, and then screwed it all in. Then we added the door hardware with the deadbolt in backward. Here it is from the outside. Eventually this is going to be inside the mudroom, and then we'll turn that deadbolt back around again so that we can lock it from in the mudroom instead. Well, that was a short video, so let's put up some lights. Wiring is super easy if you already have the boxes, conduit, and wire in ahead of time, before the lath or stucco even covered them up. It's even easier when you're using solid 14 gauge with those little push-type wire connections. Probably took me 20 minutes to do all these lights. I also wired up an outlet on this corner of the garage, 12 gauge for a 20 amp outdoor GFCI outlet, and it has already come in handy many times. Back inside, and I added the switch for the front lights right by the mudroom door. In series with that switch, I had also added this light sensor that I got for about $8 at Home Depot. I mounted it by drilling a 3/4 inch hole in that first light base so that this could poke through. It blends in pretty well. Now if I leave the light switch on, the lights will turn on only when it gets dark enough outside, and then they turn off again in the morning. This pic was taken at about the earliest time that they turn on in the evening. Here are things after dark. I've also wired for a chandelier that matches the style of these lights that will hang in that circle window. It's in series in the same circuit with that photo sensor, so they'll all turn on at the same time.